Hello and welcome to What a Guy Wants. This is Coach Yogesh and my co host, Coach Ali. And this podcast is about all things men. Today's topic is a very intriguing one. It's called the plugged out man. When Ali told me about this topic, the first thing that came up for me was Neo in the Matrix and someone plugging him out. So, Ali, can you clarify it for me? What does the plugged out man mean?
Yogesh, before we actually begin, what I really need to do is in this month or so, because you mentioned Matrix so many times, I need to watch it again because I have no recollection of it. So I need to see it again and see what it actually entails and all it has. And coming to this topic, it's about, plugged out man. There can be so many interpretations of it. Is that how, like, if I think about it for myself, it's about when I was working, right? And when I had my corporate job, for me, plugging out was more like Sunday evenings, right? For Sunday evenings was reserved for just sitting in front of the Netflix, and it was reserved for Monday blues. So all I wanted to do was like, plug out and slow down time as much as I could and just hope that Monday never arrives. It was just sitting there in that misery. And it was not fun. It wasn't amazing. It was just numbing down to the pain of the working day. And I used to just plug out from everything in terms of like I didn't want to attend any phone calls. I didn't want to speak to people. I'm like, okay, this is my space. I need this space to do something. And all I want to do is just be in front of the TV, binge watch TV, even if it didn't feel good. So for me, that's plugged out at that time. And now when I think about it, is that like at heart, right? I realized that I'm actually an introverted person. So for me right now, right, is also not that I don't do that anymore. Sometimes it does happen. We're all humans. Plugging out means it's about just sitting by myself, taking the time out and just plugging into the reality that's within, just being there. For some men, it's about like staring at the wall. For somebody, it might be journaling. For somebody, it's about plugging out from the world to just see what the inner climate is like, what's happening inside, how are we feeling, what are the emotions, what's happening there. So again, plugging out, I feel, is absolutely essential. What matters most is how we actually plug out.
Very cool. So, firstly, Matrix is one of my favorite movies. So, the first original Matrix was OG, the best one. The second and third, it's all right. And after that, you don't need to watch any of those. Absolutely like crazy. And yeah, I keep bringing it up, can't hold it. With regards to plugging out, I think a lot of every man does it. I feel I've done it. I've seen everyone do it. It's kind of like zoning out. Like I want to zone out and be in my own island, be in my own manosphere, basically. And you see that in a lot of relationships, right? Where the woman wants more time together and all of that. And the man sometimes just wants himself and the TV remote and so forth. You've now put in like two sides of it. So one side of it almost feels like a deflection. Like Ali is absolutely saturated, exhausted, probably unhappy about his job. So he deflects all of those things by watching Netflix. So if I drown myself in Netflix, in alcohol, in drugs, whatever I choose, means I don't need to face the reality, right? That, I don't like my job, I don't like something in my life, something is not working. So instead of looking at it, I deflect it. And because Netflix is easy, it's very comfortable. So one aspect of it is deflection. The other aspect, which currently you're talking about, is the same word, plugging out, but actually is a little bit more plugging in to me. It's like I'm recharging my batteries. So this is going to help me create a podcast, actually sit and do some deep work, which I have been avoiding. This is going to help me have a difficult conversation. So do you like my definition of plug out and plug in?
Yeah, absolutely. I like how you explained it. It's actually really, it's about like when we're by ourselves, right? And we're plugging in and there's no other
Yeah.
distraction. We become present to what's happening internally. We become present to our emotions. We become more present to our thoughts and feelings. And again, with regards to plugging out, right? Now that I look back, right? I had this relationship where I'd be complaining, like, I don't like my job. It's not that great. It doesn't fulfill me. It doesn't do this for me. And I never realized that now that I look back, it's like, what did I do for it? How was I serving my job as well? And did I actually want to? I was there by choice. That's where I wanted to be. And of course, then the mind plays those tricks as well that, this is safe, this is good, this is comfortable, so you stay here. And then the interpretation is like, oh, you know what, this is like suffering. But I need to suffer through this because otherwise there's no other way out. But I could have looked for another job. But again, it was not even the job. I had great people working with me, but I just realized it was me. And it was this feeling of helplessness that, oh, you know what, that's all to life. This is all that matters, and there's nothing else that matters. So for me, it was more about just completely plugging out. And there's this feeling of victimhood and helplessness, right? Like, I'm completely helpless to the circumstances that I am in. And because I feel so helpless and the reality feels so painful, it feels so painful that I need to plug out of this and I need to take a break from this reality and move almost into an alternative reality where I'm actually binging on Netflix. Because when I'm binging on Netflix, right, I don't have to think. I'm not alone anymore with my thoughts. I'm not alone with my feelings. My feelings and thoughts are actually, they're just being suppressed. Again, linked to that is that Netflix always came along for me with binging on something to eat. And again, it was more about like, running away from emotions, running away from reality. But what's interesting is that no matter how much I tried to run away from it, as the day ended and I put the power, like close the TV, right, the reality came back. And the Monday blues came back. So it was not in a resourceful state. And it came to such a point where I would actually say Sunday evening is reserved to Monday blues. This is what it is. And I would generally not accept invitations on a Sunday evening. I wouldn't go out on a Sunday evening. If there was no food at home, I would rather call a takeaway because I just felt that, no matter what, if I did something else or I met people, time would go by so fast that Monday would come sooner. And I didn't want that Monday to come. So it was just about whatever I could do to slow down time.
Interesting. I can understand that. I've been there, but there's almost like a sinking feeling at that point of time. And you mentioned the entire state of it very, very eloquently. It's actually a child like state. Think about it. Yeah. When you're a child, right, and there's a lot of distress happening. So the child is actually helpless because he doesn't have the tools to exactly communicate. Listen, all of this, mom and dad fighting is too stressful. This happening is too stressful. All of that is not okay. Children don't have that ability to a larger extent. And they are basically helpless and they are the victim of the situation. So they're there. So children actually zone out. They actually zone out. A lot of children, I'm not saying fantasies and all of it is a bad thing. To an extent, it's healthy. But children can actually go into a fantasy land where they imagine a world which is better and so forth. And that's basically called limerent behavior. So there's actually study done where limerence, especially in dating and relationships, leads to a lot of obsession because what actually say someone likes, say I like a girl, yeah, but she's actually not that into me. I don't even know her. We don't even know what the status is. But there are so many limerent thoughts from my side that there's so much energy invested there that in my head, I'm very connected to her. So it's basically what I've done is I've created a fantasy land where it's comfortable. It's like a Netflix show, but I'm in the Netflix show. I'm the main character. So I'm the main character energy. I'm pulling it off in the Netflix show, but it's in my head. So to an extent, that's how we've learned how to deflect. And this is a very common thing and it's natural to do it to small degrees. But like everything, to what degree do you do it and how is it impacting you right now is the key question.
Absolutely. I think that with children, right, it's exactly like child behavior as I think about it. It's like child behavior where, oh, I'm helpless and I can't do anything about it. So because I can't do anything about it, let me just distract myself with something else. At least in this world, I'm absolutely fine and it's almost like a protection, right? It's a safety in that world. And again, with men, right, I think that when men feel that feeling of helplessness, right, it's not like they don't want to change. They want to change. We all have that want, but we don't have that courage to take that action to change. We don't want to change that situation because somewhere down there, right, our mind loves what's familiar and hates what's unfamiliar. And if suffering became familiar, right, Netflix is familiar, binge eating is familiar, then if that is familiar, then even if there's freedom on the other side, I would choose to stay with what's more familiar. That's just generally human nature. And I'm not saying that watching Netflix is a bad thing. Anything done in extremes, it almost becomes a vice. But it's about, there are people who are like, okay, you know what? I've got another friend of mine. Every night, he reserves half an hour to watching his favorite show, and he actually loves watching it. He absolutely enjoys it. He gets the most out of it, and that's the like that's how he unwinds in the day, and that's great for him, and that works for him. Yet he's found that discipline that no matter how exciting the next episode will be, and no matter how inclined he is to put the next episode on, he will not put that episode on. It's just like this is what I've reserved time for, and there's a healthy way of doing it as well. It's about why we're doing it. It's very important to say why we're doing it. Am I doing this to get some pleasure out of this in terms of entertainment, or am I doing this where I want to suppress my feelings and emotions so that I can't feel and feel my emotions? I'm not in touch with myself. So yeah, it's a very valid point, and it comes from a very childlike behavior because it's about self-protection, feeling helpless. Helplessness, it comes from a very child trait, right? It's a child trait, feeling helpless, because in the end of the day, it's like, you know what, I'm dependent and mom and dad are there, but they're the only ones who can protect me. And it's just so interesting that, as you said it, right, when I think about my own kids as well, is that when we also play role play, right, and it happened at different occasions with my son and daughter, and I'm like, okay, you know what, right now I am going to play the role of your child and you're going to become my parent. And for some reason I did that like a few years apart, and both my kids hated it. They absolutely hated it. They're like, no, we don't want to be that role. They absolutely hated it. So it's so interesting.
Yeah, I hear you. What you said about the Netflix bit or anything in itself can't be good or bad. It's actually how we use it. So basically, if something is used as a deflection of, say, there's a pain coming up, a challenge coming up, but I'm using it to not see it, and then that actually materially affects my life. So if I'm in a very toxic relationship, but I'm not seeing it, rather than that, I'm actually just drinking my sorrows away, talking about it, complaining about it, and not actually wanting to address it. That alcohol then becomes my plug out. In the sense, it's actually hurting me. It's a big deflection. Versus if I'm just enjoying a drink and it actually helps me unwind and I can actually keep the discipline. I'm actually not very pro alcohol. I feel inflammation created through alcohol is high enough, even though there are a lot of red wine connoisseurs who say, you know what, it improves my blood, stress levels, all of it. And I'm like, yeah, you're true, you're right. A few things, but it also increases inflammation. It also changes your brain chemistry, the chemicals. So for me, let go of the alcohol example. Let's stick to the Netflix example. If your friend who loves the Netflix show, if that nourishes him and the next day energizes him to move, to work harder, to be more kinder, because his plate seems full, his cup seems filled, then the same Netflix is great. And if you're actually binging it to deflect and not address that thing which I was talking about, you're actually plugging out yourself, then that's basically the thing which is harming. So that context only we know. So it's very difficult to make general statements about this is good or this is not good. It's actually about you. How is it impacting you? And are you actually plugged out in a good way or a bad way? And which I would be like, are you plugging into yourself? Like, are you doing things which would help you resolve things and nourish yourself? So Ali, we've now spoken about this act of plugging out and this act of deflecting these pain away. What's the solution?
What my solution is actually either doing nothing at that time, or either taking a book like a diary or a journal and writing things down, or just thinking about, or even like just being present and just being staring at the wall. But it's about just plugging into seeing what's actually happening, because only once we plug into ourselves, right, we understand that something's amiss and something needs to change and some action needs to be changed. And once we think about some action, then we build up that courage to take that action. But being plugged out in that way, at least it didn't serve me in any shape or form. I really needed to plug into myself. And sometimes we need to, I guess that for me, realizing that, right, the concept of me time, right, is absolutely sacred. And so just about 4 years ago, we were traveling with friends, and, we were traveling, and there came a point that the friends were going to explore another. We were in the northern parts of Pakistan, so they were exploring the border with China. And they're like, okay, we're going to check that out and see that out. And at that point, I'm like, okay, you know what? Right now, I love being with my friends. It's just awesome. It's a great experience. But right now, I can't. Right, So I can't go with the flow. And I'm like, okay, you know what? You guys carry on. I need some me time. And they're like, you're going to miss it. And I'm like, no, that's not important for me. For me, it's, I need to become present. So literally, Yogesh, what I did was that the hotel faced this beautiful lake. So I came out of my balcony, I put a chair, and there was this blue turquoise colored water outside, and I just sat there and did nothing. And what that did for me was that I became present. I could appreciate nature. I could go into like a state of gratitude. I could recharge my batteries. And then a few hours later, I was ready to have fun with my friends again. But I needed that time to recharge. So at that time, I had to plug out in order to plug in. So, that's another perspective that I have on it.
Yeah, you went from FOMO to JOMO, so joy of missing out.
To be honest,
Um,
sometimes it's true. Joy of missing out is extremely real, right? Sometimes like internally, right? If a plan gets cancelled sometimes, at times, not always, at times, and I'm like, I'm genuinely like at peace. So yeah, I think it's a balance of both. But yeah, I've been the other side as well. And sometimes I'm there too. So it's a balance of both.
Yeah. You've gone from, I hear you say, when I have a tendency to plug out, say, watch binge on Netflix because things are getting heavy, I don't want to address this. Plugging in at that point of time seems very difficult. So, if someone is used to just plugging out, like binging, drinking their sorrows away, Netflix, if someone is so used to plugging out, telling them, hey, just plug in, sit with yourself, meditate on it, journal on it, seems a step too far. So, what would be a easier first step for you?
An easier first step. So I'm just thinking about it is that it would almost be doing nothing. That's a really interesting question. So I'm just thinking about like there was on for example Saturday, right? I heard about like the death of a very close family friend, and I was completely shocked. And for me, it was more like I don't come to terms with what actually happened. And the following day, right, I just put Netflix on because I wasn't ready to face any emotions. I didn't want to feel at that time, and I just wanted to be numb to those emotions. I was watching Netflix, and what came for me, what next day, it's about changing the state. It's almost like, it sounds crazy, but like going for a walk, like, jumping 20 times, doing something, because sometimes we are in an emotional state. And when we change our physiology, right, when we jump, when we do take some action like that, it
Yeah.
starts changing things around. And I know that we had a deep conversation about this on Monday, but it's only through facing the emotions I felt that I was becoming efficient again. And I was like, going back to what I needed to do and accept what reality was. Because, this thing about reality is that no matter how hard it is, that's the only thing that's real. So there's really nothing we can do to run away from it, no matter how much we try.
Absolutely. In my words, I would be like, there is nothing I can do to change the past. I can change the narrative of the past, but I
Absolutely.
can't change the past in the sense we haven't yet legally discovered time travel to change past. We've seen it in movies and shows, but we haven't done that. Yeah, great answer actually. What was coming for me was maybe if I plug out, say I binge on Netflix once a bad news happens or something I can't work with, I can't cope with, then maybe I'd plug out a little less that day. Instead of watching 5 shows, I watched 3 shows. But honestly, I liked your answer because just say if I'm going to be in my room, in my one space where I watch Netflix, or I go to this one cabinet where the alcohol is, or I go to that one secret stash where my packets of junk food are, can I actually change the physiology? Can I actually go out on a different location where none of those things are there? Can I actually change my physiology? Can I like do push-ups then? The mind will be like, what the hell is happening? I'm actually supposed to feel sad and this guy's doing push-ups. So that idea or taking a walk is also a little bit more sensible mind can actually take it. I've had a lot of long walks. I feel long walks are a great mental health tool where
Yeah.
we think of nothing and we just keep walking. In our older times, men used to work out their emotions just through those long walks, but it's basically gone out of the window because we're always driving, everyone's in a rush. If there's no agenda, then it's not required, right? Then let me let go of it. Ali, this is the plugging out topic has been so good. It's just actually opened up so many other avenues. If you'd like to summarize what it is, man and plugging out, how would you summarize it?
So I would say is that no matter how real the feeling of helplessness is, right? You're never helpless. You've never been, and you will never be. There's always, as an adult, there's always something that you can do. And the most important thing is that you try to do something to shock the system, something healthy, taking 10 jumps,
Yeah.
leaving the phone behind, going for a walk. And nature itself, right, is so important. And it's unfortunate that even today's workouts, right, we're doing it in gyms, and we miss out on the fresh air. We miss out on just like watching, seeing the trees and the birds. We miss out on basic things. And nature in itself, it has a lot of therapeutic properties. And it's about from trying to do something, moving on to try to do nothing. It's about try to do nothing. And that's how I would summarize it as I'm explaining it to myself right now, Yogesh.
Yep. And great summary for me, I guess. Two things are coming up. One of the thing is plugging out. The act of plugging out is also an act of deflection. And it happens in very funny ways as well. Like, I remember watching Friends. Like, we've done an episode on humor. And in Friends, Chandler Bing always is the funny one. He's a funny, sarcastic guy, right? But he deflects. A lot of humor comes up when people ask him about his relationship with his mom or dad, because those are very sensitive topics. So how does he deflect? How does he plug out? He makes a joke, he says something funny, and he just deflects it. So our deflection comes in a lot of ways, but eventually in some ways it doesn't serve us. And how we deflect is more important than what is the art of deflection. Because Netflix, even working 18 hours a day, really working hard, can be a deflection, can be actually you out of sync, you actually plugged out, so not in a good way. So how we deflect is very important. And the second thing, what you just said, carried on from it, like nature, being present, mindfulness, all of those things are actual real hacks to plugging back in for it, or plugging out in a more positive way, which nourishes us. So that's my takeaway for this session. What do you guys think? What do you guys think about the topic, the plugged out man? Did you like it? Did you like what Ali said about it? If yes, we'd love to hear from you. This is all from us. This is Coach Yogesh, and that's Coach Ali. This is What a Guy Wants, and plug in for next week.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for tuning in to this podcast on Spotify. I'm not here for the obligatory like, share, and subscribe. The whole purpose behind What a Guy Wants is to make you a better man. If you think this is making you a better version of yourself, please like, share, comment, and see you next week.